when Pedro Martinez was on the mound, there was always the expectation that you might see something great in terms of obviously pitching, but you may get a great soundbite, a great quote, wake up the damn Bambino, drill him in the ass. It was magic, and I've never seen a player on the Red Sox during my career who combined wit, personality, talent, drive, ambition, and most of all, intelligence. I think anybody who ever covered Pedro would tell you, and I'm going to get very Boston here on you, he was one of the smartest guys that ever wore a Red Sox uniform.
There's a very good case to be made that Pedro's peak was the highest ever for any pitcher. What he did in terms of dominance, looking into the era that he was pitching against, what we know as the steroids era, those two seasons, 99 and 2000, you can go back and take a look at what he did. There's so many special moments along the way. He had a 17 strikeout game against the Yankees. He had the 1999 All-Star game a couple months before that.
The greatest game I ever saw Pedro pitch, there is, again, no doubt about it. It's that Monday night game, Game 5, Division Series, Cleveland Indians. The Red Sox need to win this game to move on against the Yankees. Pedro Martinez couldn't pitch, couldn't start because he had the bad shoulder. He was in all kinds of pain. And I remember when the bullpen door opened up, when that door opened up and Pedro Martinez came into the game, 48,000, whatever it is, Indians fans were like, oh boy, that's the way it was in that ballpark. Pedro goes out throwing splitters and spitters and curves and palms and junk, topping out probably at 82, 83 miles an hour, and no hits the Cleveland Indians for 6 innings. And they go on and they win the division series. That was just absolute Hall of Fame stuff.
So he was known as Senor Plunk in Montreal because he was hitting guys. A year later, 1997, Pedro interpreted Senor Plunk as being called a headhunter. And he would tell you, I never hit anyone in the head, which is true. So he took offense at this. He was always scrappy. He's always thought he had a chip on his shoulder because the Dodgers didn't believe in him.
All the good news is accompanied by bad news. I thought that sometimes that Pedro was a bully. He was clearly a headhunter. I don't think that's a newsflash. And at the end of the day, people who play Major League Baseball will tell you that that's part and parcel of the whole. When you've got one of the nastiest pitchers of your era on the mound, and he throws as hard and as purposeful as he does, if you step up to the box with that thought in the back of your head that you might get one off the back of the head, if you follow my drift, then that makes Pedro a better pitcher, and it makes you just a little bit less of a hitter.
A lot of the hitters at the time, these big guys, many of them probably on performance-enhancing drugs, were wearing these pads on their elbows and wrist guards. He hated that stuff. He thought the pitchers who gave up the inner half of the plate were just pitching with one hand behind their back because you have to control the entire plate.
I often wonder how Pedro Martinez would have felt if he had Pedro Martinez as a teammate. And I say that because there was a famous game where he was wearing a Yoda mask in the dugout, and then there was an episode where they tied him to the post in the dugout with duct tape, first aid tape, which is all fun and games, keeps the clubhouse loose, but nobody was more serious on the mound than Pedro. And I wonder if Pedro on the mound, how he would have felt about Pedro in the dugout.
In September of 2004, Pedro in a press conference, he let his guard down. He said something that he instantly regretted. He said, I don't know what to tell you. I guess the Yankees are my daddy. And of course that became what every New York and even the Red Sox writers, they all wanted. That's juicy stuff. The "Who's your daddy" chants completely rained down on Pedro that year, and it was quite intense. And that was one of the games, one of the first 3 games that the Red Sox lost to the Yankees. And the "Who's your daddy" part was a big part of it.
God bless the Boston Herald, and this is why you love having the Herald. And they had a boxing poster, and it was like one of those old-fashioned 10 rounds, and the height, the weight, and Clemens on one side and Pedro on the other. And how could you not think that that was a heavyweight fight when you walked into the ballpark to see 2 of the great pitchers of all time, Roger Clemens facing Pedro Martinez? That's box office.
Roger Clemens throws a pitch that's high, a little bit inside, not at all. Pedro didn't think it was anything unusual, but Manny Ramirez is still steamed up. Who knows what he's on at that point. He drops his bat and he starts walking towards Clemens, and all hell breaks loose. There's this big scrum. Pedro kind of steps cautiously out of the dugout and is just standing back there. Don Zimmer, 72-year-old Don Zimmer, comes barreling out of the Yankees dugout, makes a beeline towards Pedro Martinez.
Zim was wrong. He was wrong that day at Fenway during that playoff game against the Red Sox as a bench coach to get involved in an area that was strictly something going on between the players. So what Pedro did was guide him to the ground, and that was it.
Just a simple flash reaction. Pedro's always regretted it since. Zimmer, of course, regretted what he did. Pedro wishes he had behaved differently, as his one and only regret on a baseball field. By 2003, 2004, Pedro was past his peak. In 2003, he became kind of cranky, and more of the accusations of being a prima donna or a diva, those started to crop up his last couple of years in Boston because he would arrive late to spring training.
Well, he has clearly made it his business to talk with younger players, and I can only imagine all of a sudden one of the greatest pitchers in baseball history, which is what Pedro is, and he's going to spend time with you now and talk with you and mentor you. He made this so much fun for all of us, and the chance to witness compelling baseball history, to be able to say I covered Pedro Martinez in his prime, pretty good.
I believe in my heart that if I didn't put up the work that I did and the analysis that I did inside when none of you was watching, I just don't think I would have been nearly as good and as long in my career as I was. Honestly, from my heart I say it.